everyone, and welcome to another episode of Under the Hood, Driven by Detail. Keith, I think we'll change that name to Under the Hood, Driven by the Story, or Stories Behind the Scenes, because what we've been getting up to now is brilliant footage, and it's all been stories of different people's experience in the motor trade and their lives. So can we do that? Change it? Under the Hood, Stories Behind the Motor Trade. We'll say something like that. Today I'm joined by Keith Lenihan from Keith Lenihan Motors. We're delighted to be joined also by Stephen Walker from Castrol, also Simon Guerney, who is in Castrol Technical. Thanks so much for coming. You came the whole way across from England on a bingo bus.
Yeah. Bus with wings, apparently.
He did. Simon's doing well to actually be here today. And Stephen, you hadn't too far to come. You're only a few miles up the road and down.
Correct, yeah.
So lovely. So again, thanks for coming over. I think we'll start off with you, Stephen. Daz, you're in sales, in marketing in Castrol, is it?
Yeah, so I've been with Castrol for over 20 years.
Very good.
Previously I would have worked as an account manager within Ireland, and then spent 10 years in the UK doing the national account business, working with some of our manufacturers and some of our dealer groups there. And then more recently, I've been looking after the Irish business again, and we're working closely with our official country partner, which is Serta Lubricants. So I effectively manage the relationship between Castrol and Serta Lubricants on the island of Ireland.
Very good. And probably a good point or a good time to announce that we've said it before on our Facebook page and all that, and Castrol and Serta Ireland have kindly sponsored, I don't know if you could tell, but these podcasts have been kindly sponsored by both Serta, Castrol and BG Products. So Serta in Ireland is Ireland's official country partner for Northern Ireland and Ireland for Castrol products. So if you're a garage and you're watching this and you want to get some products, do get in touch with Serta Ireland and they will have a sales rep contact you. Simon.
Hello.
Technical, a quick background, because I want to get back to Stephen.
Yeah. So engineer by background, joined Castrol on the graduate scheme actually 19 years ago. So chartered engineer now, so part of the IMAKE. Basically worked in product development, developing engine oils, working with OEMs, and now working what we call our technology deployment. So helping guys like Stephen sell our products, the training and the stories behind those.
And Keith's really excited to have you here because you have an M3.
Yeah. So I've been chatting about that already.
Yeah. So that's
BMW fanboy over there. Yeah. So I had a BMW M3 for eight years now. So
yeah, it's a nice one, in fairness.
Excellent.
My hobby car.
Stephen, we'll kick off with, we'll come back a bit of history, because you're Castrol 20 years, so I'm in the trade myself just over 25 years. We've always been Castrol. I spoke to my dad this morning, telling him what I'm doing today, and he says, even going back to when he was in his 20s, Castrol was the only show in town.
Yeah.
He's come from a haulage barge. Dad had haulage company. He says, no, he says, I insist on buying barrels of Castrol. So that's gone back, and we'll not call anyone old, but we're going back there. But you told me last night that Castrol have been in Ireland since back in the 50s.
It's actually the Castrol brand celebrated its 125th anniversary last year, which is quite significant for a brand to be around that long. I think it was 1899. The original founder was a man called Charles Wakefield, and he was working for the Vacuum Oil Company at the time, and he saw a growth in heavy industry. He saw a growth in the railway industry, and he saw an opportunity to go it alone. So he started his own business, and he found that putting a little bit of castor oil into the mix of oil helped make the oil more durable, more flexible in terms of temperature. And so that was the original Wakefield Oil Company, started by Charles Wakefield, and he developed the Castrol brand and sold that brand. Now, interestingly, that was 1899 whenever he started. Have a guess where the very first order for product came from? Came from Ireland. Came from the Wicklow and Dublin Railway Company, and the oil was shipped across, and that was the foundation of Castrol in Ireland.
So that's way back.
Yeah, a long time. And there's some lovely photographs in the Castrol archives of the original board of directors of Castrol. And in that photograph in the top right hand corner is a man called John Mason. And everybody's terribly well dressed, high collars, cravats, the whole bit. And so John Mason worked out of the original office at Westmoreland Street in Dublin. And at that time, it was Castrol's first international office. And over time, the business developed. They worked hard at it. And it ultimately became what we know today as Castrol in 1960. And it was established as Castrol Ireland Limited. And traded for many, many years, diversified, and of course, the growth of the airline industry, the growth of the automotive industry, Castrol were involved in all of that. And so the products were in demand, particularly in Ireland, through the growth of the motor car and the growth of trucks, etc. So we've a long tradition of working in Ireland.
It is, and it's lovely to hear that connection, because my own grandfather, he worked on the railway.
Yeah.
So even just the notion of back then, like here we are, you know, and as both garage owners, we both use Castrol oils. And that notion of going back to the 20s, the 30s of grandparents working on the railways, that they were using the same products back then. 100 years on, 2025, here we are. The products are still here. We're still using them. So you're talking back when Charles Wakefield originally developed Castrol oil. That's before the motor car. So you're talking about back in railway. So we're talking about friction back as far back as the 1800s. Roll on the motor car. What happened then from, say, the 60s on to where we are?
Probably if you look at the way we structure the business now, you know, we've four main channels. We've automotive, we have industrial, we have marine, and we have energy. If you think of those four channels, that pretty much guides the way the market has developed and the way Castrol's responded to the market. And in Ireland, we focus on those four channels. And we have a team that look after the marine business, that look after the energy business, and obviously with the growth of renewable energies, that's important as well. You see, a lot of wind farms developing in Ireland. So, that's where we are now in those four channels. But those four channels are very much developed over the course of the life of the business. And I mean, interestingly, you mentioned the airplane industry, and that's one that he was quite passionate about. He saw that this was a new opportunity, a new piece of technology. The motor car, again, he saw as a new piece of technology. One of our oldest partnerships with engine manufacturers was the Ford partnership. We're already over 100 years of working with Ford Motor Company. And Ford obviously originated in Cork. So there's a lot of synergy there, and a lot of history.
Roll back 24 hours ago, I knew we were meeting. I knew today was happening, but I had no idea of the connections with Castrol in Ireland to the level that it is. You speak of the Ford Motor Company, which came to, start off in Cork. What you said, Simon, last night, and probably is a good time now to move on to the technical end of it. And Simon, can you just tell us what you do with technical?
Yeah, so right now it's basically our product deployment, helping. Well, if I go back, I did product development in automotive. And then now I'm in kind of like automotive and industrial area. So really, I work quite closely with a lot of our blend plants about formulations, products, and that's in a whole array of products. So that's engine oil, pretty obvious. You've got the transmission oils, but then actually the oils that are used to make engines. So the metalworking fluids, some of the gear fluids that we talking about wind turbines. That's an area that people don't always think about. In that wind turbine, there's a gearbox that needs oil. But yeah, I work mainly on the automotive industrial side. So metalworking fluids, hydraulics. When you see those fields being ploughed by a tractor, they've got oils, they've got hydraulic systems, power takeoffs, etc. There's a whole array of different lubricants that are used. And then if you think about the world, friction is the enemy of efficiency. So what we want to do is stop wasting all that energy, make that energy useful. And the easiest way to do that is reduce friction, reduce losses, and make everything more efficient. So whilst, people think, whatever you may think, these big machines, my role, or what I like to think we do is make all that equipment more efficient.
So, and this is one of the things you said last night, and this is really what's changed how I look at Castrol as a product company, not so much an oil company, but what you do. Again, most people watching this, I'd safely say a good 95% of people are watching this, or 99 even, are just going to say, "Oh, Castrol engine oil."
Yeah.
Whereas really what you're doing and what Charles Wakefield has been doing since back in the 1800s is when he saw a product, he saw friction.
Yeah.
He didn't look at, oh, that's an engine, or that's an aircraft, or he looked at a product and goes, there's friction there, I can help that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what you're doing. You've been reducing friction for over 100 years.
Yep.
Over 125 years. So that's made me think that, as we spoke last night, that as you go around your daily business, from you get up in the morning, if you've got a food mixer in the house, there's grease on the belt in it.
Yep.
That's friction mover. No, Castrol's there. You get into your car, your Castrol's there. You open the door of your house if there's a lubricant. Castrol have products. So ever you go about your daily business, you're driving to work and you see a wind turbine. That thing's lubricated by Castrol.
You never would have thought that.
You never think that. And that's what struck me last night when I was chatting to the lads was, Joe, you take nowadays, everything happens so fast. We take so much for granted. And you don't think about anything. You say, just give me the car. Give me this, give me that, give me television. Everywhere along the line, from the electricity that's generated to run your house.
Yeah.
There's lubrication involved everywhere you go. And it was only then I thought, you know what? That's how lubrication, not oil, but lubrication is such a large business, because everywhere that you can generate friction and does it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's good friction if you're trying to machine a cylinder bore and you want the right friction response. Sometimes in a gearbox you want the right friction, but ultimately, wear is bad, friction is bad. So our role is to try and eliminate that. And we've seen with, obviously with engine oils, reduce friction, thinner viscosity, going to 0W20 and beyond.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to touch on. There's a couple of questions. You mentioned blend plants earlier and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I suppose to start with, I think any garage owners or mechanics watching it, to put it in layman's terms for them, the way remember the extended service life
Yep.
on oil. So obviously it went from, like, years ago it was 5,000 miles was the service interval, and now they've stretched it to 30,000 kilometers. How?
Yeah.
Like, and without a sticker on a bottle, or obviously it's not a sticker on a bottle, but you know what I mean? How can you stretch oil from 5,000 to 30,000 kilometers?
Yeah, so I think the main bit is there's been a lot more focus on it. So research, development, engine technology. A big shift is fuel quality. So the advanced to Euro 5 technology fuel. So the refineries all upgraded in Europe many years ago to ultra low sulfur gasoline. So by that, you're getting less acid buildup, you're getting less demand on the oil in terms of neutralizing that acid. But I think really it's been the focus, total cost of ownership. The OEMs want you don't want to change your oil every 6 months like they're doing in America.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, of course. Yeah.
There's a very different market. America's quite a good comparison where, 5,000-6,000 miles, you go into a Jiffy Lube, $30 straight out. The European model is certainly around company cars and whatnot, total cost of ownership. So the OEMs want the oil. They want to do a 1 year, 2 year drain interval depending. Some OEMs, Toyota, 1 year, BMW, maybe 2 years. They want to extend that. So it's our role as the oil marketer, the oil developer, to develop products that can do that, but with all the challenges of fuel economy, after treatment, DPFs, all the things that go on in terms of technology, diamond like carbon valve train now to reduce friction. And it's really a lot of testing. So, some of these accelerated engine tests are well over $100,000 we would have to basically run, because it's a lot of fuel and it's special fuel. So it's fuel that's specially been developed for engine testing. It's not just off the shelf. To try and accelerate it, to try and be able to run a load of different oils, it may fail. We may have turbocharger deposits. We may see piston deposits, and we can tweak the formulation, try again. And that is what has enabled the OEMs to be confident to say when this product, just for example, a 5W30 meets BMW Long Life 04, they're happy to sign that off for the 2 year drain interval. Now that is a kind of up to, a lot of the cars have algorithms or computers that will monitor how the car's driven. If you're doing short stop-start driving, you're probably going to put more load onto the oil. It's going to not heat up, evaporate all those water and fuel contaminants. But yeah, really, it's a combination of development, the oils technology is moving on, and all the testing that we
And on the
do.
development, would you be testing the oils in cars, or do you test them on a bench?
Both.
Right, because you'd have different climates. Like if you test an oil in Germany, for instance,
Yeah.
when you test an oil in Ireland here. There's two completely different climates. Obviously, you have a far more dampness here. The driving style is different.
Yeah.
You know, in Germany, you're going to be doing there's motorways
Get on the
everywhere. Whereas here,
autobahn,
yeah, the furthest you'll go is Dublin to Cork here on the motorway. I think is it? Would I be wrong in saying that? So I suppose that the different climates, the reason why I'm asking is we see a lot of DPF issues, servicing issues.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a lot of cars given premature engine failure. And I'm just, you know, just for the viewers to kind of, we've spoke about it before, just to, you know, but just to see
it from the horse's mouth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
From the people that develop the oil.
Yeah.
And
So
like,
we've done quite a few of the trials, like you're saying. So what you'd normally have is ASEA. It's the industry. It's a French acronym. I'm not going to try and say it because I can't remember it. I'm not French. But basically, the oil marketers and the car manufacturers work together to build what a baseline of engine oil spec. So you'll know it as we're talking the ASEA C3 product. Then beyond that, the OEMs want to do their own hardware. The BMW.
So it's additives, is it to the?
Well, they
to the
want to do
baseline?
that. Oh, they want to put in, say, a BMW N20 engine. They want to look at a N42 RNT. So they've got quite an interesting method there where they basically irradiate the camshaft, and then we can monitor the engine wear live by the radioactive wear particles that turn up in the sump. So you can actually live monitor the wear of an engine in an engine test environment. Obviously, it's not really safe to put in a car, but you can actually see the wear live. We're literally measuring the radioactive wear metals that appear in the sump. So we'll do that, and then if it meets all that, and obviously now the OEMs are kind of looking for fuel economy in their own hardware. Before it was like there's an industry fuel economy test. It was the M111 fuel economy. So an OEM will say, I'll be the fuel economy sponsor. I'll develop the method with an external test house. Then all the oil marketers can develop for that. But obviously that's not optimized fuel economy for all the different OEMs. So there's been a massive kind of separation where Ford want fuel economy in their engine, Jaguar Land Rover in theirs, BMW in theirs.
The fuel economy would relate directly to emissions
Yes.
standards as well, which
Yeah.
which everyone's been.
And they
all
want
the
it in their
manufacturers have been
hardware, because
pushing
if last few years it was all about getting the CO2 emissions down to get your car into a lower vehicle excise duty. So in the UK we VED, I'm sure similar in Ireland, and it was all about that. Now we've seen the transition to EV, and actually it's turned into how many EVs you sell as kind of your carpool.
You're right, because coming up in around the circa 2019, 2020, that's when all the oils, and you've seen a lot of this, Stephen, where you mean the different demand for a completely different oil, from say 2000, 2003, 2005, right up to 2019. 5W30 is 5W30 is 5W30. Roll on 2019, 0W30, 0W20.
Yeah, that's a valid point, and that's what I was actually going to ask Simon. That so, what's your view on that, Simon? So the 0W20 in a Ford, say,
Purely fuel economy.
is that purely fuel economy and emissions? So to run them cars, would you be better running them cars in the like of a country like Ireland on 5W30?
We really hope you're enjoying these videos. We'd just like to take a couple of moments to thank Certa Ireland, who are the official country partner of Castrol Oil in the island of Ireland, north and south. If you do want any products, please support Certa and give them a shout. They're really supporting us here on our podcast, and they're also supporting independent garages in Ireland like you. Do give them a shout if you want any Castrol Oil. Back to the video.
The 0W20 in a Ford, say,
Purely fuel economy.
is that purely fuel economy and emissions? So to run them cars, would you be better running them cars in the like of a country like Ireland on 5W30?
Yeah, so quite an open question though. So in terms of optimized fuel economy, and there's a big kind of drive that the car is as it was built in the factory. So there's no point making a really efficient car with 0.20 and then out in the field you're putting a 2050 and all that fuel. So there's definitely a drive, and there's always been a kind of in the franchise workshop is that the OEMs would service the cars the same as factory fill, because otherwise it's kind of you're putting a really thin oil and then in the real world you've gone thicker. So we wouldn't advocate that. I think the challenges are on 0Ws, fuel economy. So you're optimizing the performance of the lubricant, you're getting the engine to use less fuel, which is good. But obviously there's potential durability challenges. Now that's where the development and testing comes in, and the additives. So you may be going thinner, but using different technology to protect the
So
camshafts.
that's why the zeros are more expensive.
Yes.
You have
So,
more relatives in them.
yeah, and often the base oil. So to get a 0W, so, you know, when we say a 0W, a 5W, it's basically a 0W needs to be flowing at -35, a 5W at -30. And that 5 degrees is quite big in terms of the base oil you use. So you can't use mineral base oil. You have to use like synthetic technology or synthetic, yeah. So you got the molecules how you want. So you got, not to get too technical, but we want to be like having molecules the right length. We don't want them too long or too short. If they're short, we get oil consumption, which is a challenge at 0W. You know, it's thin. You can always topping it up. We don't want to burn oil either because actually some of them additives end up in the exhaust, catalytic converters, DPFs. And then we don't want it too thick, too heavy, because then you get the cold flow properties. It's not going to flow well when, you know, winter's morning, start the car and they don't start. In fact, we had this 2014, so I've worked quite a lot in Russia, and there was one morning, it was quite a mild winter, then overnight it dropped to -20, and one of the OEMs, I wouldn't say who, but they basically had 120 cars fail that morning where the oil had turned solid. It turned out over the summer.
That was that was a 0W, was it?
Well, it didn't really matter what the oil was.
Okay, right, okay.
But it's an example of what if it goes wrong. What actually turned out to be, and we found it in quite a lot of work goes on, and we've got at our labs is also BP fuels. It's not just Castrol, so we work very closely with the fuels technology guys, which I think is one of our kind of, for me, it's really useful when we have problems, but it's one of our kind of big things that we can, the synergy of engine, fuel, and oil. We can
Use
understand
everything
all of it.
in-house.
Yeah.
You have
So
a
anyway, it turned
all-rounded
out as an
approach.
octane booster, one of the Russian oil producers was using, that was getting wax into the oil. So obviously you
Washing
burn
down
it,
past
yeah.
pistons.
So that's accumulated over the summer. The first cold snap, the oil's gone solid. So basically those engines failed because the oil had literally turned solid. Oil, no oil in the engine.
Something
And
you
it-
never,
yeah.
never think of, isn't
Yeah.
it? You never think of. And this,
So like, that's
when-
why also it's good to get the fuels are as important, using good fuels. Now, obviously we're in a very different market here, but it just goes to show even the stuff you put in the fuel tank ends up in your sump.
people don't realize when, you mean, and certainly some mechanics, but most consumers, they don't realize what goes on behind the scenes. They don't realize that, you mean, come on with the old liquid technology, that people don't realize what actually goes into that. The have to provide a product that can work in all conditions, and you know, where we'd never see that here in Ireland. We'd be oblivious to that. You know, we give
And the
we give-
specs
we
do
give out with the
evolve
rain
as
of
well.
that.
Yeah, but the specs evolve. So as we came to like, you know, E5, E10, ethanol, so 5% ethanol in gasoline, B7, 7% bio content in diesel. I mean, they're green driven, reduce the carbon impact, but that gives challenges on the oil, on the hardware. So their parts, even these specs like BMW LL04, it's 04 because it came out in 2004.
Yeah.
It's evolved over those 21 years. You know, the engine's always updated. So whilst it's an old spec, it's very much kept up to date by the OEMs, keeping in mind the hardware and the fuel changes globally.
There's
Not
something
just
you wouldn't
in,
think of. So even just the biofuel, because all fuel washes down past pistons,
Yep, yep.
especially in diesels with regeneration, things like that. So while you've got fuel, and again, something that you wouldn't think of, or if you're an oil company that didn't really provide fuel, it's just what you said there. Like, it's a great all-round approach.
yeah.
Because if you weren't providing the fuel, you would have to go to further lengths. You have this all in-house.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
you-
the industry
you
do
know-
recognise it,
yeah.
but you're right, yeah. There's
So the fuel washes past the piston, and it starts mixing with the oil.
Yep.
Which would normally be a problem with
Yeah, that's why I was coming on to notice the 530 on this. So would it be fair to say, you don't have to answer this if you don't want, but would it be fair to say that 0W20 or 0W30 oils are for a fuel economy point of view / emissions to get the car released at a lower?
that's the only reason. Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
say that's the only reason the OEMs have gone to that.
It is,
yes.
yeah. So technically then, from a technical point of view and what's better for the engine, running it on 530 would be better then.
but it could change your emissions.
Yeah. So
But it
there's
will
very,
change, obviously it'll change your emissions, but this is what I'm getting at, that the 0W20 oils, the engines and technology are built based on that to get the emissions.
Purely emissions for
Because obviously the Ford Focus is designed at X amount of CO2 emissions, and that's what it's released to market at, and that's what the VRT is based on, and whatever else you have across
yeah,
Europe. Whereas if you're running on 530, that will change that value. But for the longevity of the engine, from an independence point of view, servicing the cars, like we service them with 530 because I believe it's a better oil for running them.
So Ford,
Ford.
yeah. So you like 913D type oil.
Yeah. So well, really what you're saying, and to keep the thing, because when I know, and I understand where you're coming from, because when you work in partnership with OEMs, which Castrol is one of the biggest
Yeah.
matched up with OEMs of all the oil companies on the planet, when you're working so close to them, you can't come in and say, oh yeah, it's fine to run on 530.
Yeah.
No, and that's what, yeah. So I didn't know if it was
Yeah.
But I know you guys have the challenge, you know, that it's a complicated world of engine oil, and we'd like to have one oil that did everything. It'd help you guys out. It'd make our life easier.
Yeah.
But it's not the reality. Stephen or share, but
Yeah. I mean, I'm not from a technical background, but just to give a bit of perspective to this, I mean, I can remember maybe 20 years ago, going to the market with 5W30 products. And at that time, I can remember very similar conversations about moving away from 10W40
Yeah.
to 5W30.
Yeah.
And I think there has to be an element of trust in the technologists and the oil companies and in the vehicle manufacturers that they're going in a direction to do what we've talked about already, which is to reduce friction. You know, make engine performance better. And to say that an oil will not work, you can't say an oil is not going to work in an engine. But you know, and I think it works both ways. You can't say that the 0W grades aren't going to work in the engine. You can't say the 5W grades aren't going to work either. But what you're doing is you're trying to find the optimum for the vehicle owner.
Correct.
And that's the direction that we're going in as a company.
And you're very right in what you're saying there. Like, hey, technology moves forward.
Yeah.
And you have to embrace what's coming along. But I think what Kate's getting at, and from us on the ground, our experience, Ireland, I don't believe the OEMs actually do enough. I mean, Ireland, let's face it, I've said this numerous times, you put your hand on the top of Donegal, you put your other hand on the side of Cork, you lift everyone in Ireland, you turn around England and go, boom, you've Birmingham, right? So you have Ireland's small fish in that sense, right? So you're turning around and going, right, had to be all right there, give them the same product as the UK uses, which is UK. A lot of people travel longer, you travel a lot longer to go to work or to go to, you know, Bristol Airport, things like that. There's a lot more travel involved when you're in UK. I've worked in the UK myself, and everywhere there's very little short runs, every's a long run. And go down to Europe then, where people are actually living in one country and driving to another country daily, spending 4 hours a day in a car and commuting. It'd be fair to say that's where the oils are designed for, those long commutes. But then when they come to Ireland, personally, I don't think enough is done by the OEM to explain to people. Instead of going, oh yeah, 30,000 kilometre intervals, 40,000 in a Renault. To me, I don't think there's enough done to say, right guys, you're in Ireland, it's a different climate. If you shorten that interval, you know, they're leaving a lot to the likes of the independent workshops. You have the main dealers who, like yourselves, they have to stick to the OEM message.
This is what I was saying earlier. The main dealers need to get a customer till they're out of warranty. Our customers, we need to keep them going for the next 10 years. So obviously that's why we had this conversation plenty of times, and I just think it's an interesting one to kind of get into. Like, you know,
I mean, Ireland is quite a mild climate if you look at globally. You know, but a lot of these oils are developed maybe, you know, in Middle East or somewhere really hot all day. I mean, some parts, even Turkey, can get quite hot in the summer. And then you've got the other extreme, Sweden, Nordics, where it's extremely cold and the oil struggles to get up to temperature to drive off those. So you basically got two challenges. It's cold, you've got fuel and water in the oil you need to get rid of.
Yeah.
So you need to heat up the oil. In fact, to your point earlier about biodiesel, the boiling point on some of those bio components is over 200 degrees. So they never evaporate. Yeah. So you can only drain them out by draining the oil. Fossil-based diesel will evaporate.
So again, if we're using more biodiesel, we got to do change
more
often.
Exactly.
Not because of anything to do with the oil.
No.
But because the fuel you're using is contaminating now.
Yeah, and then depends on the drive cycle. If they're doing a DPF regen more often, actually a lot of computers in the vehicle will recognise that and actually say you need to go in earlier. So some vehicles do that. But you've got the extremes of cold, and the other extreme is if it's really hot, the oil is going to oxidise. So if it's 10 degrees hotter, its oxidation rate doubles. So if it's very hot, I mean, like going around the track day or whatnot, you are going to make that oil age quicker. But But in terms of like Ireland, I mean, damp is an issue. It's humid.
Salty damp. It's where.
Yeah, but I think in terms of like what we developed for globally, I mean, a lot of the tests now are looking at kind of even fuels like methanol, 25% ethanol. So we kind of test beyond that. A few years ago, we did a trial around Derby. We had 5 BMWs all driving around. The police were called a few times because it looked a bit weird. But basically, you have a car with the other 4 behind it, so they're all doing exactly the same. Every day the lead car changes because obviously it has a bit of an aerodynamic. But do a motorway simulation, go around the town, and then go around the Peak District. So we did 60,000 miles on. We did an oil change at 30,000 miles, and 60,000 miles full engine stripped down to look at the difference between our oils. So that's the sort you're talking about on world testing. We do that, but a lot of it is, you know, the OEMs and industry develop tests, but look at all the different parameters, all the different fuels. We can control humidity of air, temperature of fuel, all these different parameters you wouldn't even think of, even the, you know, the back pressure on the exhaust, not just the inlet.
That's a massive
Inlet pressure, but actually the exhaust. So we're testing the oil, we're not testing the weather, we're not testing the fuel temperature. The tests are to test the oil. And that's really critical on fuel economy. I mean, if anyone's gone to a rolling road, you know, go on a day, let's say last week, 0 degrees, or go in the summer, you're going to get different numbers based on humidity, pressure, temperature. So we don't want that. We want to say, right, this oil is given a fuel economy benefit because of X, because of the oil, because of the friction modifiers we can put in. But to the point of 0W, I think, let's say 10 years ago, it'll be like, right, engine oil. Let's just say the car OEM ABC. We've made this great new engine, high Castrol. We've made this engine. What oil do you recommend? Whereas now it's, hey Castrol, we're developing a new engine. We want to work together. We call it co-engineering, and we can develop the engine with the engine oil with the engine. So we have engines in our technology centre 3 years before they even announced to public, working with the OEMs, the hardware manufacturers, to optimise the whole package. Because if you look at a part of an engine, you might think, oh, let's make these piston rings work really well with this plasma-coated, nitroid sealed, whatever piston cylinder wall, or maybe diamond-like carbon tappet with a new camshaft profile. You're looking at that just little area, or you're looking at the piston rings or the turbo. The oil is the only part of an engine that touches every part of the engine. So you've got to get it right in every area. And if you get it right and you optimize it without compromise, you can get 1% fuel economy just from that oil and engine interaction.
So to see on that, you're saying, so you're working in partnership with the actual vehicle manufacturer who's developing their own engine.
Yep.
So you developed that then. So you have, if you want to call it a better word, you've got the secret sauce. You know.
Potentially, yeah. Don't think we can sell it as KFC, but yeah.
But you've got that secret recipe, right?
Yeah, or we have the tools to make it. We might not have it,
yeah,
but we can work with the OEM to make that.
But that's yours, right? So what I'm thinking is, so basically when I turn around and I say, right, you tell me, I get on to our local representative there, Patrick, say, right, I've this car coming in a couple of weeks. I know the oil here. What oil is that? Say, for example, it's one of the cars you've co-developed. It's fair to say that the oil that I'll be getting from Castrol is the exact factory fill oil that was designed for that engine. If I bought a different brand of oil, that even if it's approved, they can't really guarantee that, like, they weren't there when the thing was being made.
Yeah.
Is that a fair point?
Yeah.
We're not going into it too much.
No, I think it's fair. So as part of kind of this code, we call it the co-engineering cycle.
Yeah.
On that kind of third segment is like issue an oil spec. Because actually, whilst we'd love it, it's not really competitive that we're the only guys that spec. So the OEMs publish the specification and go, hey guys, if you can make an oil to this spec, you can have the approval as well.
Yeah.
But before that, we've gone through helping them understand what challenges they have on that particular test or that engine. You know, maybe the oil's thickening up too much. So towards the end of the drain, actually the oil's getting thicker, the engine's not running as well. So maybe we need to make the oxidation performance better. Then in the spec, they may have an oxidation test that is more severe than what it would have been. So we've helped develop the spec so that that spec is then better for their vehicles globally. And whoever makes that spec would provide that benefit. So yeah, we do help them develop the spec. So, you know, like the Jaguar Land Rover is a good example, or Volvo or Ford, really good co-engineered partnerships we have, and they're, you know, we publicly share that. I think, to your point, yes, you're literally buying the same product, the same oil that was filled in the factory
That was
in the
developed
service,
for that
that
particular
engine.
engine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same as like if you go, you know, if I wouldn't, maybe people would, but if, you know, the suspension arm brakes in your car, you want to get most of the time the OEM part or equivalent. You don't want to go on eBay and just find the cheapest one. So there's an aspect of that. Like it's the right oil, there's right oil, right car, but beyond that, it's this oil was literally developed for your hardware. What's the best thing to do?
It's really good
Get
likeness
the
there.
right, yeah.
It's really good likeness. So you're talking about a suspension part, and let's face it, we all know who makes the OEM suspension parts for, say, German vehicles, for instance, because they're easy, they're local, and
You see ground off and logo.
pretty much. And whereas the more inferior, spurious product, they're not copies, they're just made, they wouldn't be made just as well. You know, so if you're the sort of garage that is progressive, you want to do the job right. You want to know that when the job's done first and the car comes in for a suspension arm, if it's a Mercedes, you're not going to run for the cheapest arm you can get, because you don't want that. You know that is not going to last.
Well, we're back in 2 years, weren't they, complaining that it's not
2
going to
years
get.
if you're lucky.
2
Yeah.
years?
6
Yeah.
months, 3 months.
I was being optimistic.
Whereas,
But yeah, you're going to come back on, mate, and then like you've sold me this rubbish
And it's
on.
hassle for everyone. It's customers.
And I like to think that with oil, you know, if
Yeah.
you put the right oil in, you haven't got to worry about your engine. You can save a few quid, but what happens?
But if we turn around, so if we're the sort of garage that says, right, well, look, the main dealer's charging Mercedes, for example, or GLO, are charging for a 2017 Range Rover. I know the front four control arms are 1,500 quid.
Yeah.
I can buy them from the people that make them for JLO, because JLO don't make control arms. They buy it in. JLOs don't make oil. They buy it in.
Well,
So
yeah,
if
I
we-
mean, they say car manufacturer, they're car assemblers, really.
Correct. So if we're the sort of garage that wants, right, well, look, that's a bit proud. Customer doesn't want to go that far. Who makes the arms? We find out who makes the arms, and then we say, right, they're going to lad. That's pretty much the original product.
Yeah.
Why would you, if that's what you do, why would you let down your guard when it comes to your oils? Why would you not go for the oil that was made with developed with the manufacturer? Do you know, that's, I think it's important to note, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously we have partnerships with particular manufacturers, but we also work with dealers who aren't necessarily aligned to those manufacturers. And probably the common thing that you'll see in both is this incredible desire to have a really top quality product. And because of the heritage that we've already talked about, that's where Castrol tends to be really, really of interest to independent dealers, to franchise dealers, to dealers in other market spaces like industrial and commercial vehicles, etc., because they have a confidence in the fact that the oils will have gone through rigorous testing, whether it's for an original engine manufacturer or whether it's to produce an oil to meet a specification that's been developed, perhaps with another oil brand. But that means that then if you find some of the larger dealer groups choosing Castrol for 100% of their supply, the reason that they've got confidence is that they may have in their portfolio 50% of their marks being Castrol partners and 50% that aren't Castrol partners, but they've got extreme confidence in that second half of their car park having the Castrol brand because it's a market leader with great heritage and a great investment in quality and technology. And it's kind of hard in a conversation like this to demonstrate that. And I think that's the good thing about having Simon here today, is that you're hearing from someone who actually is involved at the sharp end of developing those products. And I mean, there's a large team that work in the background in Castrol who work incredibly hard and with real passion to make sure that the products that we deliver into the marketplace are of the highest possible quality. And in the aftermarket, we probably talk about 3 streams to our offer: people, products, and programs. So having good people on the ground the people that you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis who are selling you Castrol products, but they're just at the very end of the process. It's all of the steps behind that and the people that you never get to see that really make Castrol what it is. And then you have the actual products themselves that they sell, and then the programs that are used to help businesses like yours succeed in the marketplace. So it's a dynamic business, it's an exciting business, but it does rely fundamentally on what happens in the background to develop those products.
I think while most independent garages, because at the end it was, we said last night, like there's a guy from a software company came out and had a chat. I remember years ago sitting in on a meeting with Dad in the haulage business, and Ivan just said, look, most hauliers, in fairness, and he wasn't trying to be insulting, although it might have come across insulting. He says most hauliers are they're just a lorry driver with more lorries than they can drive. And most garage owners, like ourselves, we're just mechanics that have more cars that we can fix on our own.
I think it's very important that because we are, like yourself and yourself, the customers coming to us now, a lot of customers that would come into us wouldn't have a clue about oils. They would just rely on us to give them the best product. So it's up to us to educate them, and because you can't, there's oils, as we all know, that there's chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
And I think when you're using a good quality brand it's Castrol, it's just it's a powerhouse of a name, to be fair to it, and I think customers need to be educated on that. And I mentioned to you earlier about some people coming in with this special offer service, and for whatever you're into, if that's the route you're going to go. But you can't, if you actually price the oils, which is the correct oils that you have worked as a partner with the manufacturer to build these engines with. Yeah, you can like anything with suspension bushes, you can go and buy, go on to a better word, right?
Rubbish.
And you can do the job far cheaper. Whatever about a suspension arm is going to start knocking, or whatever's going to happen, and you'll have to replace it. But when you're putting shite engine oil, for want of a better word again, into your engine, the results can be catastrophic.
Yeah, you don't know, do you, what could happen?
And I think it's up to us as the independent to educate the customers.
But it also falls back on, and I've said this before, and it's a controversial comment, because a lot of mechanics, look, let's face it, we all think we're great, right? Everyone thinks they're great at their own job. I'm great, and you can't do it without me. And it doesn't matter if you're a butcher in a shop, or you're a fishmonger, or you're a mechanic or a plumber. I'm deadly, right?
Yeah.
How can you think yourself as being really good at your job, whether you are or you're not, if you're willing to fit rubbish? So for me, that's why I think it falls back on, you're right what you're saying, Keith, that it's weird. We're at the cold face of dealing with the customer. And for us to do our job right, more and more independent garages, it's easy for the main dealers, they're just following protocols and specs. They don't deviate off that. But for an independent garage, there's some cracking independent garages around this country. We're really, really lucky in Ireland to have some really good independents. And from talking to different suppliers, some of the really good guys, they're dropping the ball when it comes to product quality. So I think independent garages, they need to aspire to be the best. And when you aspire to be the best, you'll use the best, and then you'll have a confidence in that product. And when you have a confidence in that product, if you had a cheaper branded, whatever it is, if you have a cheap product, you're not going to be confident. You can't stand in front of your customer and go, I've done a good job, because you haven't used a good product. And you know that inside. So for you to be, I think everyone needs to aspire to be the best, and to aspire to be the best, you need to work with the best.
I think of a good one there now. You were talking about blending oils and stuff like that earlier. So obviously Castrol are using, they've worked with the manufacturer, and they've proven to be the best, or one of the best at what they do. So the more inferior oils, I think, would that come down to blending, so that an oil that's cheaper versus the premium product of Castrol, how do they make it cheaper?
Good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I mean, I'm
Right.
not here to throw shade at other companies. but
and we're not.
I wouldn't know what.
But is it the blend? Is it the blending?
Yeah,
is it
I
less
mean,
additives? Is it a poorer base quality oil?
They might not have full approvals and just hint that it's kind of recommended for example. So then you can kind of use maybe different chemistry, different additives, different base oil. So if we look, we had an analogy last night: a pint of Guinness and a pint of lager. Most of it's water. The difference that makes it is the additives. It's the same with oil. So 80% of an engine oil is base oil. The other 20% is additives. And they're either to make it a multi-grade. So we put literally polymers in there that when they get hotter, they kind of like spaghetti. So they kind of branch out and make the oil thicker at higher temperatures. But ultimately, the rest are kind of performance additives, so anti-wear, antioxidant, detergents, dispersant, friction modifiers, and anti-foam. And it's a bit like I could put them all on the table and go, there you go, guys. Let's just think if it's a cake. I could give you all the ingredients to make that cake.
Yeah.
But how do you make it into a cake? You've got the same ingredients. The art is how, blending is part of that, how you put the oil together. So you don't want the anti-foam dropping out, you don't want the oil turning into kind of a cloudy, hazy piece. So blending temperatures, order of blending is part of it. I mean, it's not critical, but what we have a very, I'd say, robust way that, because we make, I can go in the lab and make a litre of oil to the absolute micron. We do all the testing on it, but then the product, when it's out and we're doing a 30-ton blend of it, we want to make sure it's as precise. So it's making sure the precision of the blend, so you're not like putting in not quite enough additive or too much. The precision's right, you're getting the right amount of chemistry in there, because we don't want too much in, because then your DPF's going to have problems. So we're looking at the amount of additives in there. And then we have, we test everything. So production blends, filling blends, first filling, last filling, just to make sure that we're happy. It goes out the door. So what's on the can is in the can. That's kind of one of our mottos.
It doesn't matter if it's a cupful or a tanker full.
Yeah,
it's
it's as precise.
Yeah.
So, and that's the reality. Like we need to make sure everything we blend and test is representative of the stuff out in the market. Now, I don't know what other people do, but that's definitely something we aspire to. So, I work closely with the plants. We do a lot of factory fill. So with factory fill and the automotive industry, I don't know if you get, so it's IATF 16949. It's basically a dedicated automotive quality standard. So really precise, get audited to make sure, because we're making parts for a car that goes in the factory, they want to make sure we're kind of doing it as they expect. We're not, our blending tolerances. What other people do, they could make it cheaper just by selling it for cheaper. I don't know. They could be a bit more flexible on, let's say, the water, the base oil.
Yeah,
But I don't know.
I think the analogy that you used of the cake, I know it's a silly one, but everyone will understand it.
Yeah.
It's just
You can buy a cake in the supermarket,
yeah.
or you can buy a cake in a baker.
But it's not, if you're making
yeah,
a
if you
cake,
put the
and
eggs in the wrong bit.
yeah, that's what I mean. If you put the way you mix the eggs, at
Peg
the
it all
start,
in,
no,
exactly.
I think
if you
it's
did
perfect.
that, I mean, I was in the when I was a graduate in the lab, it's a great way to get your hands on it, because some of the stuff is water, some of it's like treacle, some of it's powdered. So you really get to feel what these components are. But if you get it wrong, you can make some weird gels. Yeah. If you put the wrong components together before you have the base oil to keep it separate, you make like literally glue. It's never going to work. Yeah.
Brilliant, yeah.
Okay. So, but one thing, and I know you will want to distance yourself from this topic, but we're going to answer one of Keith's questions, because I know this goes on, and if any of the HGV mechanics are watching, they'll be familiar with the Scania, the V8 engine that has the oil spinner on it.
Yeah.
So what does the spinner do?
Well, basically, so with a diesel, and what OEMs in passenger car have tried to do is avoid this by going to higher pressure. But when you have a diesel, even though it's seen as lean, there's too much air, so it shouldn't be any rich parts, but you get parts of the combustion that's rich. And if it's rich, there's unburnt fuel, that turns to soot, that soot then goes into the oil. So the best way to get, a way to get rid of that is to basically a centrifugal filter that spins the oil so
hard,
that all the soot comes out.
And it sticks.
Another method is having an oil filter, but eventually that's going to
stick
plug.
to the side of the inside of the engine, does it?
It's the V8 Scania, so the spinner. So what happens when you
A lot of the Japanese do that as well.
Yeah. I haven't seen them, but when you screw the cap off and you take that, it's literally, you have to hoof this stuff out of the, and that's your soot, that's your carbon that's in the oil, and it makes the oil last far longer.
Yeah.
So on that note, there is certain companies, and again, we'll not go into it, but some of the, if you buy a barrel of oil and it's at a price that you're like, wow, how can you get that? There's a good chance that oil has been collected from the likes of me, you, quality stuff. It's been gone into a place where the big spinner, it's been filtered, put back in the barrels, So you're no longer getting Simon's special sauce. You're getting Sean and Keith's special sauce. It's been used, and so it's worth remembering. I know it's something you can't say this is definitely what, but that it does happen. But how do you the surefire way to avoid ending up with a product that's already done 15,000 or 20,000 kilometers in someone else's
Does
engine?
that actually happen? Yeah. Like
Can it?
I've never
Yeah,
heard of it
right.
now. To be fair,
Yeah.
but mind you, you're up in Dundalk, so you what? It's all starts to carrying on goes up there.
Well, you see with fuel, don't you? With the red diesel, people find a way to sell that as diesel, but people do. Who knows what goes on?
Let's just say,
I mean, yeah,
let's just say when you're talking to mechanics from around the country, especially from around Dublin, that generally when you buy diesel, it's diesel. But when you come up around the border area, we are much more used to problems with DPFs and injectors and things like that than people from further down the country would be. Now, not so much in recent times, but going back 10 years ago.
well, it's a good example.
Inject.
You think diesel's
injected
diesel,
SOM.
but yeah, we don't get into fuels here. But actually, the fuel used can impact the injectors.
So one of the biggest things to remember is that if you want to guarantee that when you're putting so much effort into your garage to raise the bar, to keep your standards high, you need to keep your products high. You need to work with products that are on a top tier level. And the only way to do that is buy them from official distributor partners from these products. And again,
We don't want someone serviced and then a few months later they come in, their turbo's failed because you put rubbish oil in. They're going to question, what did you put in? You, the garage, have broken their car. So why not put in the right products and then no problem motoring and the customer's going to appreciate that because no one wants a car breaking down and not being able to get to work and whatnot. So
we do a lot with BG products to do the additives. We sell a lot in here. And I was chatting with Kieran and a couple of weeks ago, and he had said that he had visited the garage recently, and he'd went in and he spoke to this guy, contacted him, and said, look, I want to supply, want to use your products. And he went in and he just said, look, as he does this with all, he will not just sell it off the shelf. He'll come, he'll visit the garage. Yeah, and next thing he looked in the corner, and there's a particular brand of oil that, let's just say, would come under the what I just spoke about. Wouldn't be great stuff. And he just goes, sorry, look, I can't supply you because it doesn't matter how good my product is, you can't fix that.
Yeah.
So until you fix that issue, and the issue being, you need to get a good quality oil in here first.
Yeah.
Then give me a shout. When you get rid of that and go to good product, good quality product, and he'll tell you himself, if he walks in and he sees Castrol in the place, boom, we work, because he knows a good product. You can't build a business on a foundation of rubbish.
No, for sure.
So, come here. We'll end this episode on that. Daz, thanks so much for your time coming over. If your time would sit on, we'll try and get another one of these.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't.
No, it's pleasure, honestly.
Stephen didn't even want to come on the camera today. But thanks for watching this. We hope you watch next week's episode, or we might get it next week or the week after, whenever we get them all edited and sent out, that you'll enjoy this one and enjoy the next one just as much. Thanks for watching.